So they were traveling somewhere.
I've managed to work out the broad strokes. It's fairly evident they were in the process of leaving before things went apart.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, we're now on day 7. It's basically been a week since 19-year-old Jay Slater disappeared in Tenerife. And so the questions are coming up more and more. Could British police make a breakthrough? Could their introduction into the search, could that make a difference? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Welcome to the many of you who have subscribed. If you're enjoying this content, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So initially the family and friends did seem to be campaigning for more police, but especially British police. And I've said before that this is kind of an artifact of the Madeleine McCann case, the inept foreign cops, let's get our police force in to do the job properly. Not in this case. Local knowledge is important, particularly when searching outdoors through asymmetrical terrain. Think about your neighborhood, how well you would know your neighborhood and how to find things and look for things and get through it compared to a neighborhood in some other city. You wouldn't know where to start. So that's an urban neighborhood. A rural wilderness neighborhood is even, if you want to call it that, terrain is even more difficult and complex. Do you remember the 15-year-old Nora Quoirin, a Irish-French girl who went missing in 2019 in the Malaysian jungle? I wrote a book about that case. It was also compared to the Madeleine McCann case, which sent massive resources far afield in search of phantom kidnappers. And by the way, that whole narrative, the whole conspiracy narrative, is one we need to deal with as well. There's a lot of lunacy going on at the moment. Now, huge resources were mobilized in that case: choppers, dogs, the army, ground-penetrating radar. And guess how they eventually found her? I mean, you literally had the Malaysian army, hundreds of men moving around like ants through the countryside. And in the end, it was amateur hikers, locals, that found Nora lying naked across a shallow stream barely 1 mile from her hotel. Kaylee Anthony in Florida also wasn't found by law enforcement or professional search teams or dogs. She was found by a local, a utility worker named Roy Cronk. In the same way, the British authorities could hardly know where to start on unfamiliar terrain, which is why the Spanish are in the best position to lead and manage the search. Trust them. Now think when doing a search, one's got to put yourself in the shoes of the person who's gotten lost, but also ask a very straightforward question. How do we get lost? And I think the simple answer in this case is that Jay met some people on Sunday night and they drove him back to his apartment in a hire car. And Jay didn't realize how far away it was. He may be talking or joking or whatever. Meanwhile, it's dark outside the windows of the vehicle. He's not really paying attention to that. And then he arrives at his destination and he thinks, well, that was a 10-minute drive or something, or 20-minute drive. How far could it be to walk? And maybe didn't quite keep track of time, even how long the car drive was, right? So that's one aspect. Another aspect is Jay probably underestimated the size of the entire island, and overestimated what he assumed to be the simplicity of the island. I'm on an island. How far could it be? How big could it be? And from a distance, Tenerife doesn't look like much. So if you're looking at it from a brochure that's showing you kind of an aerial view, then you're really not going to think that this kind of thing can happen. And so, as I say, searching for missing persons really begins with appreciating how easily people get lost to begin with. We get lost when our mind maps are off, and they're off often because of a combination of being, first of all, being in unfamiliar terrain and being disoriented. And both of those together lead to you not realizing the size or the scope or the scale of the landscape that you're moving through. Now, in two American cases, 16-year-old Kylie Rodney and 22-year-old Riley Strain's case, both got disoriented in the dark. That's another simple way, just that. It's a simple way to not really not appreciate what is actually at stake. And of course, substances play a role in that disorientation as well. And so it's no surprise that part of Jay's, I think, error is because he'd driven the route before. He thought he knew it, but he did it in the dark. Does that make sense? Tenerife is a roughly triangular-shaped volcanic island. It's got 3 main cities, a couple of little towns and villages as well, but step off the main road connecting one city or town to another, and you might as well be on the moon. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but the slopes this is volcanic terrain. It's very different to terrain in sort of a lot of other areas, and certainly in the UK. The slopes are sheer, they're steep, it's rugged terrain, it's also kind of a scrub landscape. It's a lot drier than you would get in the UK. And a twisted ankle here isn't just a misstep, it could be fatal. And going through an area that's kind of a national park area on a Monday, it's not the sort of time where a lot of people would go there, I would think, compared to on weekends. There just would be a lot less interest in that sort of area on a Monday, for example. Now, you might say comparing these mountains to the moon is like overstating things, but a decent analogy to what we're dealing with here is Table Mountain in South Africa. Have you ever been there? Table Mountain seems harmless. It's barely 1,000 meters high. It's barely a tenth the height of Everest. And yet fatalities on what appears to be one of the tamest mountains have actually kept pace with the fatalities on Everest. Everest is surely one of the most dangerous mountains to traverse on Earth. So why is that the case? Why do people die on tame Table Mountain? Well, it's because they also underestimate the mountain. People die from falls, from exposure, and from underestimating the mountain. And once again, that word underestimating is key here. How do you underestimate a mountain? Well, you don't dress appropriately for it. You don't take enough supplies, and also you don't charge your phone. According to the Mountain Club of South Africa spokesman, even experienced hikers have been unlucky on Table Mountain. And so they talk about 10 to 20 fatalities on it a year. Very easy to underestimate how big it is, and it's not a simple mountain at all. And then they actually go on to say more lives are lost on this mountain than are by great white sharks. And so you look at a mountain and you think, yeah, it's no big deal. You look at terrain, you think, it's just, you're not going to lose your life on it. You look at a great white shark and suddenly you are a lot more in vigilant and alert. Well, that same vigilance and alertness needs to be and being prepared when you on mountains. Most of them die from a range of things like accidental falls when taking selfies, or taking the wrong route, or dehydration when becoming lost, or from a sudden change in weather. So a simple thing like taking a wrong turn, which I think happened here, dehydration, which I think happened here, becoming lost, which I think happened here, can be fatal. Now, we have precisely this fabric when we examine the circumstances surrounding Jay Slater's disappearance. We don't need intrigue. We don't need gangs. We don't need sinister aliens to explain what could have happened. We have enough to explain what has happened repeatedly in these sorts of settings from the known circumstances. And so we don't need to lean on criminals, let alone rocket science. For me, the real villains of the story are the social media opportunists who it really is disgusting, who, like vultures smelling carrion, can't seem to resist the urge of turning this case into something it isn't, some kind of shocking, fictional, true crime thing as a way to draw people to their own content, I guess, and then milk its high-profile status for all it's worth. It's a well-worn path, and it teaches people how to not think and to become hysterical. It's not very, and this is one case somewhere, but it teaches people to think about things in the same hysterical way as regards everything else. It's not good for our society. And so it amounts to criticize the cops and turn everyone else in the story, those searching for Jay, into suspects. It's basically turning people into a mob, turning people into witch hunters. It's not good for our society. And even Jay's family are starting to appreciate this. Debbie Duncan, Jay's mother, initially said that we need British police, and I think Lucy did as well. But what Spanish police are saying is that they are concerned that noise around the case is having a negative impact on the search. And she said they have actually said that there's too much noise and it's affecting it. They've got all the plans, their locations. They've got this map they were showing us shaded in different colors. And so Debbie has renewed calls for, even so, for the British to fly to Tenerife to join the search. And then in a statement, Lancashire Constabulary said that their offer of help has been refused by Spanish counterparts, because I think that would be part of the noise, and it interferes with a systematic search and a systematic approach. Now you've got to have interpreters there as well. And so Debbie has said, we've had a problem with the language barrier. It's difficult with all the Spanish police and British police. They have to let Spanish police do the investigation, right? She says they have to let Spanish police do the investigation, but I want somebody to come out here. And that has led folks like Jay's parents, just as occurred with Riley Strain's parents, to criticize and undermine the investigation in favor of TikTokers. In a world like this, devoid of common sense, we are all lost and collectively becoming losers thanks to these paths of least resistance. Think about Jay himself wanting to be somewhere else and then just deciding to walk there without giving it a lot of thought. He's going down a path. He's propelling himself down a path of least resistance because he's not really thought about it very much. He hasn't really thought critically for very long. And the people watching are doing the same thing. They're getting lost in conspiracies. They're getting lost in the terrain of things they don't seem to know a lot about. And I think what it shows is an overall lack of integrity and critical thinking. What do you guys think? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.